Welcome to Folktales Then and Now podcast, to the new and the faithful listeners. And your ears are in for a treat. To make sure you never miss another episode in the future, hit follow wherever you're listening to this. And if you have your notifications switched on, then there's literally no excuse to miss out ever again. Let me remind you what Folktales Then and Now is all about. It's about allowing yourself a short time to escape the everyday busy world into the mystic, and hopefully to offer you inspiration maybe to get outdoors and explore your own local landscapes and tales and learn about their history. Such as this one, set in the county of Nottinghamshire, a market town called Southwell. And it's our first historical legend style of folktale, because we've previously covered tales that are very much supernatural and even ghostly. So, coming up in this episode.
And then...
to the pub. I mean, the King's Head Inn.
Yes, it's not any old pub, is it?
No, this pub is called the Saracen's Head now, but it was actually where Charles I had his last night of freedom before he surrendered. Talking of getting inspiration, all the stories I retell come from an old little blue book called Folktales of the East Midlands by Eric Swift, published back in 1954. Swift was a historian and teacher with a passion for this region, especially Leicestershire, where he lived. Because I'm from this region myself, and having a collection of tales from the region where I live, something written by a local author just really had me fascinated from the minute I picked it up. Now, it's no longer in print, but I found and bought, did pay for it, from a charming bookshop in the Peak District in Derbyshire called Scarthins. After the storytelling and we've examined the folklore within, we always head out of the studio and visit where each tale was set and ask the question, do these legends still survive today, and what's it like now? Any images, video, photos of the locations, what three words, and links to the places themselves can be found on our website, folktalespodcast.com. However, I never venture out alone. I am always joined by my producer, Mark. So grab your headphones if you're heading out for a walk. Make a coffee and find a cosy corner, whatever you do when you listen to your podcasts, and settle in as I read you the story, The Shoemaker of Southwell. King Charles I had slept badly through the night, for many anxieties troubled his mind. His army had only recently been defeated in the Battle of Naseby. And now he had very few supporters left in the southern Midland counties. Would he find any friends or assistance here in Nottinghamshire? The King's Head Inn was comfortable enough, yet sleep had not come easily. In the morning, he sat down to breakfast, but ate very little and soon pushed his meal aside unfinished. Rising from the table, he placed his plain black hat upon his head and drew it low across his brow. He wore simple clothing and had no attendants with him. No one in Southwell knew who he was, not even the landlord of the inn. He decided to take a walk. Passing through the archway of the inn yard, he paused and looked across the road towards the minster. Slowly he crossed the path leading to the west door and entered the church. Inside, it was large and magnificent, yet calm and still. He knelt and prayed for a long while. Afterwards, he sat down, stretching his legs out before him, trying to consider what he ought to do. But his spirits were too low for clear thought. As he gazed downwards, he noticed a large split in the leather of his right boot. How strange that it had come to this, a king with boots in need of repair. In happier days, his servants would have noticed such things long before he did, and his new boots would have been provided without his ever thinking about them. Now, he must attend to such matters himself. Perhaps he should order a new pair in Southwell. Yes, even if they were not finished immediately, they could be collected later. At least it would give him something to occupy his mind. He knelt once more for a short prayer, then quietly left the minster and turned right towards the town. No one paid him any attention, and he felt relieved to walk the streets unrecognised. Looking along the row of small houses and shops, he searched for a place that might serve his purpose, and at last he came upon a shoemaker's shop down a narrow side street. Above the doorway hung a large wooden boot swinging from a bracket, the sign of the trade within. The king stepped inside and tapped his walking stick rather gently upon the floor. "Coming, sir," called a lively voice from the back. The shop was dimly lit, and without waiting, the king sat with his back to the window and pulled his cloak up so that the lower part of his face was hidden. The shoemaker soon hurried in. He was a fairly young man with curly red hair and a strong chin. He wore a sleeved waistcoat and a leather apron that tied over his shoulders and around his waist. Standing respectfully before the visitor, he clasped his hands together. The stranger cleared his throat and explained somewhat uncertainly that he required a pair of new boots and needed them quickly. He mentioned that he was not a resident of Southwell, but was staying at the King's Head Inn near the minster. He also offered to pay for the boots in advance. The shoemaker nodded and fetched his measuring rule. Placing the customer's foot upon a small stool, he began carefully taking the measurements, marking them with chalk on a small board. But every now and then he paused and sighed deeply. The king, who felt sympathy for sadness so like his own, asked kindly what was troubling him. The shoemaker leaned back and ran his fingers through his red hair. "It is a curious dream I had," he said. "Last night I dreamed I was in London, though I've never been there in my life, sir. In the dream I saw a gentleman with dark curling hair and a beard. He stood alone upon a platform raised above my head. I felt great fear in my dream and struggled with it. I turned to someone beside me and asked, 'Who is the man standing there alone?' And the person answered, 'He is doomed, and none who serve him shall prosper.'" The shoemaker spoke with great seriousness, as though the memory of the dream still frightened him. "And what happened after that in your dream?" asked the king, leaning forward and listening with deep attention. "Then, sir," said the shoemaker, "I awoke. I was partly relieved that it had only been a dream and that terror was gone, but even so I remained uneasy, wondering whether it might have been some kind of vision or whether it carried a meaning." The king slowly withdrew his foot from the shoemaker's hands. He stood and walked over to the window, remaining there silently for a time as he looked outside. Then he turned around and deliberately removed his hat so that the light from the window fell clearly upon his face. The shoemaker cried out in shock. He scrambled backwards to his feet, stumbled against the wall, and leaned there breathing hard. Forgive me, sir," he stammered. I must think of my livelihood. I have a wife and a child to support. I cannot make boots for you, I fear. You must seek another craftsman, but not me, sir." The king said nothing. He quietly placed his hat back upon his head and pulled it forward again. Taking up his stick, he wrapped his cloak about him and walked slowly out of the shop. Once outside, he made his way along the streets of Southwell. and turned his steps back towards the inn. So, I'm not sure if historical folk tales really have a strict moral or lesson you can take away. Were they more for entertainment or to keep the historical stories or legends of places alive? But for me, I think this particular story does have a really strong message, actually. And that's always trust your gut instinct or your intuition. And, if you need to say no, however intimidating the person or the situation you're contending with, if it's best for you or keeps you out of harm, then trusting your instinct and acting on it, then that's a tough thing to do. And I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that, especially if we can relate to it in a way where we've gone against that gut instinct and it's not turned out particularly well. This story took place in the Stuart period of English history, and for once, dating the story is easy because it features a monarch of the Stuart period. This reign began after the last Tudor monarch died, which was Queen Elizabeth I. So, as she didn't have any children, and as per hereditary succession, it was her cousin, the then James Stuart VI of Scotland, also became King James I of England, and he was the first monarch to rule both England and Scotland. And then on his death, his son Charles then also inherited, as per succession rules, the crown became his, and he became King Charles I. Some people don't really know a lot about this because there were so many rich characters found in the Tudor dynasty. The Stuart period came a little bit overshadowed. But this is despite it becoming a period that saw a civil war in England that meant that England was a republic for a matter of a few years. And also it brought us the famous gunpowder plot. We have bonfire night as a result of that. In some places they still burn Guy Fawkes, or an effigy, shall I say, of Guy Fawkes. Folklore is a wide-ranging term that covers customs and traditions and the superstitions and beliefs of a group of people or culture. And there's none so prevalent that in this story that highlights the beliefs of the times, which is a person's dreams. And it isn't because it's a lowly shoemaker refused the king, but it's why he refused the king. And it was his belief that his dream was a dark prophecy or a bad omen and was so unwavering to him that it didn't matter who stood in front of him, just that they rekindled such fearful feelings that he felt in the dream, and he was terrified from a dream. So nowadays, most people, we're sceptical, at the very least, about dreams and their meanings or importance. Research over the years has meant that aspects of sleep can be very clinically described in 4 terms, and most of us are familiar with the rapid eye movement state of sleep. But there's 3 others, and they are N1, N2 and N3. So you can't get much more clinical than that. And generally, nowadays we sleep in one continuous state. So, for example, a person might go to bed at 10:30 at night, and it's now expected that we're asleep right through until whenever you wake up or get up for work. So in REM state, your brain is the most active state, and this is where you can experience different types of dreams like nightmares, recurring dreams and prophetic dreams. But actually, we're looking at how we interpret dreams now and how it differs from back then. Nowadays also, how many people remember their dreams? Mostly we get up, get straight on with our busy lives, and very quickly the dreams can be forgotten. It's not often you place any importance on it. For example, if you dream that your teeth are falling out, most people wouldn't wake up and ring the dentist that very same day. But what of sleep and dreams back in the Tudor and Stuart period? Even their pattern of sleep from sunset to sunrise was different. And this could be down to the lack of artificial lighting, alarm clocks. But they had a first and a second sleep stage. And in between was an hour or two of wakefulness. And this time was about midnight to 3 a.m. and could be used for prayer, reading, quiet time with family, but they didn't do anything high energy or stimulating. Some people enjoyed it. It was feared by others. Because, like the Tudors, the Stuarts were also of the mind that these hours were where the veil of the other world was thinnest. It was where witches made mischief, spirits and ghosts stirred, and in the darkness and absence of any human activity in the village during those hours, nightmares could linger. And it's not surprising that this was known by some as the witching hour. Now, during the night, and particularly in this quiet period between sleeps, physicians believed that the human body was ruled by a balance of humours, and from these, vapours could rise from the stomach to the brain, disturbing the mind. And these night vapours, as they called them, were blamed for nightmares, sleep paralysis, and strange visions that were experienced during one of the sleep stages. Now, they might be seen as warnings or messages from the divine, or, more ominously, as signs of demonic influence. The Tudor monarchs also were famous for having the utmost faith in astrology, for what we'd refer to now as more supernatural guidance methods or decision-making tools. Most famously, Queen Elizabeth I had a chap called John Dee, who was a mathematician and yet also an astrologer. She made key military and political decisions based on what he predicted. And many, including nobility in these times, paid handsomely for their birth charts to be calculated. And they completely believed of their life's path that was predicted by it. So would they marry well? How many children would they have? How prosperous would they be? So it's not surprising that in an era where astrology was at the forefront of decision-making, that dreams were also. Interpretation drew on centuries of philosophy, religious teachings and folklore. So, of course, the messages were taken very seriously. In noble courts, dreams could even influence politics. A ruler might use a dream to justify a claim to the throne, or a warning in a dream could prompt action against potential betrayal, for example. And among common folk, dream analysis was deeply intertwined with superstition and everyday belief. On the other hand, Christian theologians approached dreams with caution. Of course they would. Not all dreams were seen as divine, and only dreams aligning with church teachings were actually considered by these theologians as trustworthy. Also, many medieval thinkers followed Roman philosophers like Macrobius, and it was him that categorised dreams into 5 types: insomnium, visum, visio, oraculum, and somnium. So, we've touched on modern day insomnia, where we can not get off to sleep till very late at night or the early hours, or wake in the middle of the night and then stay awake. But in the case of the shoemaker, we are more focusing on the prophetic dream. These were known as rare and dramatic. Visio dreams offered glimpses into the future, often showing rulers or saints symbolic warnings. For example, like a king dreaming of a crumbling tower could signal and be a message about the end of his reign. And such dreams could reshape decisions and even history itself. So during my research, the biggest example comes from 312 AD, when Emperor Constantine reportedly had a prophetic dream before a decisive battle. This experience not only influenced his decision and led him to victory, but it also led to his conversion to Christianity, and therefore changing the entire course of the Roman Empire. So, from peasants to monarchs, dreams in the medieval world weren't taken lightly. They were a bridge between the human, the spiritual, and the mysterious forces of the universe. With that said, and with this historical, legendary folk tale in mind, we're going to head out of the studio and walk the path of King Charles I on his way to find a new pair of boots in Southwell in Nottinghamshire. So, come with me and never forgetting my producer Mark on an adventure.
Okay, right. So we've arrived. Where are we?
We are in Southwell, which is a market town and minster in Nottinghamshire County. It's, the name of it, and it ties in with a bit of pronunciation, which we might touch on later.
Now, you see, this is what I was thinking. Is it Southwell or Southwell?
Right, so everybody else in the world pronounces it Southwell, but the residents pronounce it Southwell, and how it's spelled, Southwell. And the origin of its name can be attributed to, there's 4 wells in this area, and many years ago, medieval times, they were thought to be holy wells. The number of residents is just under 7,500. Many of the houses date back 12th, 13th, 14th century, and it's got Roman origins.
So when I said, where are we, I was thinking more, not like a whole pot of history of Southwell or Southwell. I was thinking more exactly where are we? Church Street car park, I was thinking. That was the long answer. The short answer is we're in Church Street car park in Southwell, Southwell, which is, it's pretty close to the minster, isn't it?
It's about a 2-minute walk. It is the only car park that facilitates the minster, and it's pay and display, but really quite cheap, to be fair.
About £1 an hour or something?
Yeah, something like that. So as parking goes in the UK, that is cheap.
So as soon as you look out from the car park, we're literally across the road from the minster.
Yeah, let's head off.
Okay, we've now just got to the minster. We're at the arch of the main entrance.
I mean, this was originally built in 1107. I think it took about 70 years to build. And over the hundreds of years, you can really imagine weary pilgrims travelling so many miles. And whichever way you're coming into Southwell, you can see these Gothic spires. They just dominate the skyline. But we're here to look at the Archbishop's Palace and the ruins of it, because it's relevant to our story. Did King Charles actually pray here? But just a little bit of background on why we're in Southwell Minster, and then why we're going to visit the Saracen's Head. Southwell is where King Charles I surrendered to the Scottish Presbyterian troops in 1646 during the English Civil War. We are in the main part of Southwell Minster itself. It's beautiful, as cathedrals go, because it's known as the Cathedral of Nottingham. It's quite small when you think about some of the huge cathedrals like Westminster and things like that. It's free to enter, I'll add, but because it costs a few £1,000s a day for them just to keep the doors open, they do request a £5 per adult donation. I think £10 if you come as a family. But they really do encourage visitors. They do a lot of educational work with children, and the staff here are super friendly. We're going to enter into the chapter house. This is not consecrated, apparently, but it's where all the priests, the monks, did all their administrative works. There's a huge chapter library, but that's only open by appointment. So, Southwell is known as the jewel in Nottinghamshire's crown, and it's not just because of the minster or the Roman origins, it's because parts of the minster itself are famous in its own right. So we've entered the chapter house, where the Leaves of Southwell carvings are just blowing our minds. They're amazing. There's carvings of faces, beasts, religious icons, and some green men. We're at the Archbishop's Palace, which is adjacent to the main body of the minster. It's a palace in ruins, really. Part of it is, anyway, because during the Civil War, Cromwell's army stole all the lead for the roof and over the years left exposed to the elements. We are going to head into the actual chamber and see where King Charles I would have come to pray and contemplate. Let's go inside.
That is a heavy door, isn't it? That's a proper door, isn't it?
So, early monarchs touring the kingdom and archbishops travelling between London and York stayed in the adjoining palace, which came to ruin during the English Civil War in 1642 to 51. And we know that the likes of Cardinal Wolsey and King Charles I, they crossed this threshold. Let's have a look around. As we walk around, as ever, I take some interesting little pictures.
Right, okay, why have we got a picture of a Bramley apple?
Because Southwell is famous for the Bramley cooking apple. For those of you who are not familiar with this, you don't bite into it. It's a very... Tart is the word. It's not sour, but it's definitely not sweet. It's not an apple that you would just eat on its own, but it is famous, especially in the UK, for cooking. The Bramley apple was discovered in Southwell in 1856. With stairs, and there is also a lift access up to the State Chamber, which is, again, always open when you're visiting the minster. So, like I say, fully accessible to everybody. I love the ceiling. As you go up the stairs, the ceiling's all wooden. There's so many things that I love about this because they really do celebrate. It's Roman, it's medieval, it's Tudor and Stuart histories. Right, let's go in the actual State Chapel. So the reason we're here is because in the Shoemaker of Southwell folktale, King Charles comes over because he's been looking for support. He's been negotiating with a French diplomat that apparently is staying in Southwell. And he comes over to the minster for prayer and contemplation. Whether King Charles actually came into this part of the minster to pray, or whether he just stayed in the part that we've already walked through near the high altar, we really don't know. This room, it's got a high wooden timbered ceiling, wooden floorboards throughout, some amazing stained glass windows with family royal crests on them rather than religious depictions. It's wood panelled from the floor halfway up, and above that there's some amazing oil portrait pictures of the royalty and the Cardinal Wolsey. If you were royal and people knew you were on a royal visit, this is most definitely the place you would come to pray, have quiet contemplation, maybe conduct state business. There's a rumour that he could have possibly signed the surrender documents the day after our story took place. That's not quite known. There's nowhere to prove that. But don't forget, in our tale, he was in disguise. So there's a possibility he just came in and sat where everybody else would sit, near the altar or near the font, to do his prayer. But definitely this is a royal state chamber, and he will have come here at one stage or another anyway.
Yeah, so we're going to go get a coffee, important things, caffeine, and then...
to the pub. I mean, the King's Head Inn.
Yeah, so it's not any old pub, is it?
No, this pub, it's called the Saracen's Head now, but it was actually where Charles I had his last night of freedom before he surrendered. We are standing in the courtyard, just under the archway, where all the horses and coaches would have come in after travelling for miles. And whether this was royalty, nobility, or just general guests, it's a little bit like what you'd see on the period dramas, where you can imagine the horses hooves clattering along the cobbles. So the hotel management have very kindly let us record and look in the King Charles suite. We're now in the oldest part of the building, and you can really tell because the whitewashed walls intersected with these stunning timber frames, and even the doors outside, little notice above the door saying, due to the historic nature of the building, please mind your head. Because the doors, I'm 5'3" I would be fine, but my producer Mark is over 6 foot.
I didn't notice that sign here.
That's why I've got a hat on. We've just gone through the door and immediately you see a dark wood wardrobe. To your right, you opened a small white wood panelled door, small by our standard doors anyway, and it's just lovely. It's a sumptuous room in keeping with the times. There's rich dark wood furniture, a beautiful canopied 4-poster bed, and all the upholstery and cushions, that rich red with like pale gold lion embroidered motifs. And as the time of the architecture, the windows, of which there's 2 on one side, sash windows, not updated. I'm assuming this is a listed building. The 3 words for the Saracen's Head: albums, modifies, heartache. That's quite apt, really, isn't it? It was the last days or hours of King Charles I's freedom. His heart must have been very, very heavy. The really interesting thing about this room, and we're talking the bedroom specifically, there is an ensuite bathroom. There's a beautiful clawfoot bath. But the really interesting thing about this room is on the end wall opposite the 4-poster bed is a whole wall of mural painting, and it is in colour for the most part. This has always been visible, apparently. So it was the fashion, this kind of wall covering, in the 1590s to the early 1600s. And as with many stately homes or renovated places, when it went out of fashion, they just covered it up with lime and mortar or boarded it up. A bit like the Bramley suite in the same hotel. You can tell that was covered in lime and mortar. And it was only discovered in 1997. But in this room, in the King Charles suite, it's always been visible. There's the black and white Tudor style walls. I say style, it's actually the original, and an amazing timber arch joist across the whole of the width of the room. The Saracen's Head was built in 1460, around that time, but shortly after the Civil War, because of showing loyalty to the political times of the day, it would have changed its name from the King's Head Inn. So the King's Head Inn was built in 1460, and shortly after the Civil War, it became the Saracen's Head, because at that time we were a republic for about 10 years. But this is really, really gorgeous. So, as a historic folktale, we know that at least the majority of the events took place when and where it says. The King's Head Inn, albeit renamed, still stands, and the majestic minster is truly a sight to behold. Southwell itself practically oozes history, with all the royals and important characters that have stayed or travelled through the town. But what of our shoemaker? We couldn't find any hard evidence of him or his shop, and so he still remains a mystery, yet a prophetic character in the story. And we do truly hope that by not helping King Charles on that day and trusting his gut instinct and the belief in his dream, that he went on to live a very happy and healthy life. That can't be said about King Charles I, who was publicly executed a couple of years later on the 30th of January 1649. So that's the end of this episode, and we'd be fascinated to hear if you've got any similar folk tales in your area, wherever you are in the world. Also, if you're enjoying this podcast, please do like and share to those you know and love, and leave us a review so we can continue to make more content for you. We hope you can join us next time. Folktales Then and Now is researched, written and presented by me, Vanessa Burrows. Sound design, production and editing by Mark Burrows. All content is my own unless otherwise identified and credited. For more information and social media links, visit folktalespodcast.com. Special thanks and credit to Eric Swift, author of Folktales of the East Midlands, whose work inspired this podcast.